In the tunnel.
In the tunnel.
In the tunnel. You're listening to In the Tunnel.
Hello and welcome to In the Tunnel, episode number 100. Now, did you believe it would take us over 3 years to get here?
Yes and no. Yes, because, I don't know, we did do this while, one, there was a pandemic, which you would think would have gotten us maybe to 100 quicker, but at the same time,
Yeah.
when sports stopped, that really kind of eliminated things. Two, grad school was also a factor into this. And then you were moving, and then I was moving again. Uh, and also, I can't believe it because we really hit like 35, 40 episodes in the first year, like clockwork.
Yeah, I think,
We actually had a normal schedule. We were doing it almost weekly, if not weekly, then like 10 days. And then it just absolutely smack hit a wall.
yep.
Because as you level up in the real world, you don't have as much free time.
Yeah, so anyway, special episode number 100. We are gonna spend it talking about one thing in particular, where we take a deep dive into the past of the NBA.
Yes, this is our first trial of a deep dive format. Not to say that we will not continue doing our other format, but I think that this may grow some interest in otherwise not necessarily investigated areas.
Yeah.
Um, so, our first topic would be the deep dive of what if Grant Hill stayed with the Detroit Pistons, and what if that sign and trade that he was involved in never happened?
Yep.
That sign and trade, as we know now, included big names, but at the time was
Were
really
they
kind of
really?
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I,
Uh, so yeah, let's see. What was the big blockbuster trade back then, right? So the Pistons got Grant Hill, quite obviously, who signed a 7-year, almost $93 million contract with them. He was a five-time All-Star, and he was going into his late 20s or his.
yes.
The Magic received Ben Wallace and Chuck Atkins, both whom were undrafted. Um, Atkins was on the All Rookie team in '99/2000 and was in Croatia before that, whereas Ben Wallace had been in the NBA for 4 years.
Yes. But at first glance, let's take a look at the one thing that really stands out here. And it's not the money. It's the fact that they traded two undrafted players for one top
Superstar at the time.
three, yeah, top three superstar who had been in the league 5 years and made five All-Star teams,
Yep.
essentially. And so, what we look at this in trade format terms, because I think a lot of this is lost on today's NBA landscape, is there were no draft picks involved in this trade.
Nope.
Whereas in today's NBA, draft picks are swapped like candy.
Yep.
Um, and so, what makes it very interesting is what actually made this seem like it was a fair deal to begin with. In theory, at that point in time, Orlando had fleeced Detroit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, money was very different then.
I mean, it's
And
a
it
lot of
could have been
money. So
seen.
it's like they offloaded a huge potential cap hit, right?
Right, but at the same time, NBA contracts in today's landscape do not operate the same way. There are no
True.
7-year contracts anymore. I
Yeah.
think the longest you can go is 5.
Yeah, that's if you're being re-signed, right?
If you're re-signing with your original team, yes.
Yeah.
Then you get an extra year. If you're an external team, you have to go 4.
Yeah. All right. So,
So yeah, the trade not not like Taylor Hall 1-for-1, but a very confusing at the time of August 3rd, 2000 when this went down,
yeah.
2-for-1 of Ben Wallace, who was a center at the time, an undersized center who I
Oh,
believe
yeah.
was 6'9", and
Well,
that was
undersized, even in today's age, like 6'9" is a small center, right?
yeah, but small ball will allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So, according to Basketball Reference, and thanks to them for a lot of this information, Ben Wallace, indeed 6'9". He went to Virginia Union University,
Great.
and Chucky Atkins was originally drafted, but then, or no, not drafted. He was undrafted.
Undrafted. He went to
Played
Croatia.
right, but he had his rights signed, I guess, and was playing in Croatia. He was a 5'11" guard. So no matter how you slice it, for the early 2000s, 5'11" is probably too short for a guard, and 6'9" is too short for a center.
I think
And
they're at the cusp of like just being too short in the early like because I don't know if we can say that like the game
not,
became
no,
I think at like 0203 the game became like 6'2" or bust.
I guess, yeah, there are some players since then 6 foot, 6'1", because you also have to remember Iverson was a 6 foot shooting guard, not
Yep.
even a point guard. But the thing that Iverson had was the undeniable talent and the ability to take over a game.
Oh yeah.
And the difference there was we're looking at a 5'11" guy from Croatia who went to South Florida and was American. And at that point in time, going overseas was not the way that you got into the NBA, whereas now you have an off chance of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, but to kind of disagree with you a little bit more when it comes to the center position, it wasn't just about height, it was about size down low too.
Mm-hmm.
You had the Shaqs of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and then in a couple of years later, you had the Yao Mings. So this is at a time where 7 footers maybe were not the most prominent and plentiful, but they were the ones who were dominating.
Oh yeah.
And I think as you were looking at the late 90s and early 2000s Lakers, and you saw a guy like Shaq dominating,
My point is more
Wade,
so that like it still wasn't like it wasn't the majority, right? It was the Shaq or Yao Ming or like a few
terms of,
others.
but in terms of building a team that enters a championship window, you had to compete with that level of dominance
Mhm.
because there were more dominant guards and forwards
Oh yeah.
go on. You had Chris Webber and Peja Stojakovic in Sacramento. You had Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin in New Jersey. You had Kobe and Shaq, Eric Fisher, Robert Ory,
Mhm.
all with the Lakers. And you had David Robinson and Tim Duncan and eventually Tony Parker. So it wasn't necessarily an issue of being able to match with everywhere else. Because if you look at today's NBA, if like I saw a tweet the other day about how the center position is today's NBA equivalent of the running back. You
Mhm.
don't really need it to win. But the difference is back then, it was completely flipped.
Oh yeah.
And there was because at that point in time, guys were going from high school to the pros, that talent was there even sooner.
Yeah.
So if you had a differential of talent, it wasn't, well, we have to wait for the next big thing out of college. That next big thing could make the jump 2 years earlier, arguably, than anybody else could have.
Yeah.
So
Very
that's where
true.
you got your Tracy McGrady's from, and that's where you got Dwight Howard was at the end of the era,
Hmm.
but you have a lot of different options that came there. Kobe came out of that path as well, so the college route wasn't for everybody at that time.
Right. So anyway, let's take a look at the contracts.
Yeah,
So
so as we mentioned before, Grant Hill was on a 7 year and
93 million,
93 million.
with it starting at the low end of 9.5 and going to the high end of just under 17,
Yes, it was an incredibly backloaded contract
which
if you
is
look at it year by
nowadays
year.
standards. Even if we got like a 7-year contract, it's not going to be this backloaded.
Right, but
In
we're
fact,
also
it's going to taper the opposite way.
right. That's because we're looking at an NBA and a sports landscape where not even just the NBA, but it's a players' league in most sports
Yep.
now. And the players are trying to get their money now because if they have a debilitating injury or something like that, and they are forced to retire from the game, that they're taken care of.
Yep.
That was not the case then.
Hmm.
The NBA was very different. Um, now we have an NBA where I know this is a little bit irrelevant, but back then the NBA had a dress code that everybody had to, have a certain style because the reputation of the league was that it was too low class and too inner city.
Right.
Whereas now it's it's not that the fashion is different, but fashion has come around to
Oh, it's
enable
different.
that kind of well, you know, wearing loose fitting jeans in 2002 meant something completely different
Yeah.
than what it does now. Now it's an homage back to then, but then it was seen as gang adjacent, for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
Um, and so the league was very different then, and it not only was the money different, the league was in a completely different place. International play wasn't, and marketing wasn't as strong. So the contracts, yeah, we see 7 years for 93 million. But what we also see is undrafted players getting somewhat marginally less money, but not like today. We'll see a guy on the veteran minimum
Yeah.
and will make 2 million a year, or a mid-level exception make 5 million a year, where a LeBron James or a star player makes 30 plus million.
Yeah.
But what we have here is almost, yeah, it's half the money, but the money wasn't a lot.
Uh-huh.
So we have Ben Wallace, who was on a, let's just say, a nice lengthy deal, and it worked out for him
I think
because
it worked out for both
he,
sides, right, Ben Wallace?
uh, I think so. Ben Wallace had only played 1 year with Orlando. And what was really interesting to me is the amount of interest that Ben Wallace had for an undrafted player at the time.
Hmm.
Because he was in his first year 22 years old, which now means, 4 year college player. And normally you'd be undrafted just for that reason. Um, but he only played 34 games his first year, 67 his second, 46, and he only started 16 games apiece in his second and third year.
Yep.
He only played less than 200 minutes overall in his rookie year, but yet he was able to flip to Orlando and become a full season starter.
Hmm.
And from that, gather what, a 6 year contract?
Yeah.
So
Was he?
uh,
He
it,
might have been traded at the end. I'm not sure.
At the end of what?
The contract
Um,
in the last year, one of them was.
no, he was 06, 07. He was
Oh, okay.
unrestricted.
And then Chucky Atkins, 4 years, making 4 million. I don't know. He was kind of. I don't know what to say about that one. That's like
Yeah,
normal
but
undrafted, I guess.
yeah. See, but this is where it gets interesting. Is if Chucky Atkins is your undrafted guy who's your run of the mill average guard, but Ben Wallace is your defensive player of the year, and the difference in the first 2 years is $1 million or less for the talent differential. And Chucky Atkins, who is nowhere near as the superstar that Grant Hill is at the time, is making a third of the money in the first year, then I
But
don't
also,
understand
you
why
have
this.
to like contracts were different back then, right? Look at how backloaded both of these contracts for Grant Hill and Ben Wallace are, right? It's just a different type of contract, I think. I like
Uh,
if you're talking between this contract time and now as a contract time, well, it's too much of a different landscape because of the 4 year max if you're switching team. But also like it would be the same as saying like, oh, the guy who signed for like just 2 years and a guy who you're probably gonna pay $40 million for 1 year and then taper him off because you don't think he's that good.
difference is now a Chucky Atkins is an expiring contract that never got the sign and trade. He's a throw in,
Yeah,
and he's a throw in with other assets. Because yes, in it like this is how the game has changed so much, but Grant Hill being a superstar and Ben Wallace, this is before we even knew that he was good because he was only averaging at this point in time in Orlando. What was it here? He was,
we can take a look at the stats now if we want.
yeah, let's do that because
All right, so
it's
we are
deciding to give
you want to look at
averages.
Grant Hill, Chucky Atkins, or Ben
Okay.
Wallace first?
Oh, all right. Let me actually dive in here because I found why I needed to. Ben Wallace was averaging 4.8 points per game and 8 rebounds. And
Yeah, but he
he was
wasn't
getting,
playing. He wasn't starting. He wasn't playing that many minutes.
he was. He started 81 games
Oh,
out of an 82 game season,
okay. I thought we said he wasn't.
averaging less than 5 points.
Hmm.
So you traded a superstar for, and I'm going to combine here in terms of points, about 15 points.
Great.
15 points per game for a
Yep.
superstar. Why
Anyway,
wouldn't
so let's see
Orlando
what the
trade?
superstar has done, right?
Yeah.
So we'll go all the way back to the 96-97 season where he played 80, right?
Yes. So a little bit of a backstory here. Grant Hill, I believe, went to college all 4 years.
Yeah, I think so.
Uh, and he went to Duke, won a bunch of, or was in competition for national championships every year that he was there, um, because that's how Duke rolls. So
Yep.
yes, he won 2 championships and had a 4 year career at Duke, and he averaged 17 points and 7 rebounds at Duke in his senior year.
Okay. Anyway,
So
we'll go. So he started off as he played forward, right? Shooting forward. Anyway,
uh,
right? Um, for his 96-97 season, because that's the year that we have on both of these charts, right? He had some turnovers, what like 120 were bad passes and 60 lost ball. Um,
Yeah, but the thing about superstar playmakers, and again going back to Iverson, is there is a trade-off you will accept.
okay.
So like you get away with more when you have the ability to make plays that others don't.
Okay, I guess, but I still think that's kind of like,
Well, yeah, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for part of this stuff. If
mhm.
we're gonna poke holes in this, then let's poke
Yeah.
holes and call a spade a spade.
Yeah, true, true. Is there any other stat you want to focus on?
Uh, let's see here. I have to bring it up on my computer because I can't read this shit. Um, so yeah, in terms of win share, so what win share is, and what we're going to focus on primarily in examining the advanced metrics of this trade. A win share is a divvied up amount or portion that statistics deem a player contributes to the overall team success. So
Yes.
we're going to look at especially win share per 48 minutes. That's assuming that the player is on the floor for 48 minutes. What is the
Their
amount that
contribution
they.
to the win.
Right. So when we look at Grant Hill at this point in his career with Detroit, his win share
He
percentage
had his high of his win share per 48 was at his high of 0.223.
0.223. Now that was good enough when we did our research to be one of the top 150 or around 150 season win shares of all time.
Yep.
So an individual's success over the course of a season of all time. So we're talking Kareem, we're talking Jordan.
Yeah.
So, and this was on a team that, yes, they had Jerry Stackhouse for a number of years. Outside of Jerry Stackhouse and Grant Hill, was relatively empty in
Mm-hmm.
terms of depth, in terms of uh, front court scoring. So Grant Hill really stands out here. With that being said, at that same point in time, if you wouldn't mind indulging me as we go further through the list of players here, you look at Chucky Atkins, who had a win share over 48 minutes that at its best was 0.107.
Correct.
That ranked nowhere near the top 100 or
Yeah, I
top
mean, you
500.
don't expect it to.
Don't
Um,
expect it to, but this just speaks volumes as to what Chucky Atkins was as a player. Because Ben Wallace did have a .190. That was his
yeah.
best, but
But
that
hold
was
on, that's after the trade, right? So if we want
so
to be correct and look at it before the trade, we want to see the
right.
0.142 that he had in 98, 99.
Right. And as we said earlier, when it came to that, he was only playing 46 games that year.
Yeah. But that
So,
shows he did pretty good in those, I guess. I mean, if you're theoretical about win share over 48, if you assume that there's only 5 players on the court, you expect to, like, in theory, perfection is point 0.2 for everybody, right?
right.
But that's not the truth, right? You have, like, back then especially, you had subs coming in all the time.
So in the year where Ben Wallace's win share per 48 was at the highest, he averaged 6 points, 2 blocks, a steal, and 8 rebounds.
Yeah, and let's just not talk about when his win share was minus 0.052.
What year is that?
96, 97.
He averaged a total whopping 1.1 points. Uh,
Yeah, he had
but
a negative win share.
this is a testament to him not playing, though. He obviously was a rebound machine in his career
Yeah.
when he averaged 2 rebounds.
Yep.
So,
Um
anyway,
yeah. So do we want to take a look after 2000, 2001, right?
Yes, and I do want to touch on this trade as a whole before we do that.
Okay.
So I did some extensive research here because, as we said, what were the dollars before? Um, and so, as it turns out, and thanks to all the sites out there who do chronicle this, you know, on we do have what looks to be, and I have to do some more digging to find Grant Hills on the certain site, but we do have what in today's dollars or adjusted, I think, uh, dollars as of recent years, what it would be. I don't know the exact year, but Ben Wallace's contract at the time, you know, you can add almost $2 million to either Chucky or Ben Wallace's
Right.
yearly contract for today's dollars, and that means
But that means you
well,
probably can add
payroll
like
is
3, 4 at a minimum to Grant
right,
Hill.
absolutely, and then you have more of the differential you would see in today's NBA because we're talking percentage increases at that point in
Yeah.
time, much like you would in our full time work.
Yep.
Those percentage increases we live for. Who would have thought that 5% would be everything I had hoped? Um, so, but at this time, like I said, the NBA was a different game and that league was so differently run. So, but at the same time, we have to think of media markets.
hmm
You know, we're not talking about New York, we're not talking about LA, we're talking about Detroit, and we're talking about Orlando. And all the fucking kids in the world who go to Disney ain't bringing the magic back from the dead.
Nope.
So, uh, 24th in payroll in the NBA, and this was at a time where there were only 29 teams.
Yep.
We didn't have the Charlotte Hornets and we didn't have the New Orleans Pelicans. Um, and I'm thinking the Thunder too. I know I'm including relocations here, but like this is just we're showing the difference in era.
Yep.
So Detroit was number 24 out of 29 going into the 2000-2001 season in payroll at a lowly almost 41 million.
hmm
Now, nowadays, you'd have to be the Pittsburgh Pirates, Cleveland Indians, or Tampa Bay Rays to have a payroll that
That
low
low.
in Major League Sports. And to
Yeah.
make it even worse, the Orlando Magic were 27th out of 29 with around 37.5 million, which makes being a Pirates fan in an unrelated fashion just that much worse that we can fast forward 20 years later and the payroll is matching for the Pirates now pretty much what the 27th lowest team or the 27th highest team in spending was
Yeah.
in the NBA when there were less teams and there were the actual money in this country meant less.
Yep. All right. So let's take a look at the teams in 2000, right? So obviously we'll start with the Magic. So you had Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady, quite obvious. Mike
Yes,
Miller,
Tracy was an additional signing in this offseason too.
yes. Mike Miller, Pat Garrity, Bo Outlaw, Daryl Armstrong, Troy Hudson, Monty Williams, D Brown, John, I can't pronounce your last name, and
Look, I don't look. I know we've done pronunciation games with you in the past. This is just to show how weak the NBA was at this time. The NBA rosters were 15. I stopped at 11 because like I wanted to show the parity that was how bad the second unit of most teams were at the time.
yep. Yeah, and Michael, I can't pronounce your last name either. Anyway, your coach was Doc Rivers. Oh, we still see that name around.
Yeah. Yes, and again, I'm including stuff here that like will boggle your mind because of what happens as this goes.
By the way,
So
I
you
like
have
how you say that their offensive rating was 14, their defensive rating was 10, yet their net rating was lower.
yeah, and they actually had a net rating of plus 1.8. That's how bad it was. It was like they brought in two huge names, and their offense couldn't, bl-
But
blast up the
also, I
chart.
don't think you had players played like neither. Like nowadays, what you have like maybe 8 players that will play in a game, maybe.
In the playoffs, maybe.
Yeah.
In the regular season, you will see 10 or 11.
Yeah, but in the playoffs, you probably have like 8 consistently on the court.
Yeah, it depends on the team.
Yeah.
Whatever team James Harden and Kevin Durant are on, because of all the shit that they had to give up to get James Harden to fucking be there
Yep.
and half-ass through it so that the Brooklyn Nets don't have a bench, that team will play 8 because they just don't have anybody else. And everybody else on the bench is 38 years old and using a walking boot.
Yep. Yeah, anyway, you want to talk about the Pistons?
Yeah, so the Pistons at this time, after this trade happens, like I said, they had Jerry Stackhouse. Now, Jerry Stackhouse's career trajectory, he ended up bouncing around a lot. He was a couple time All Star, I believe. I know he was at least a one time All Star, and in his Detroit games was or days was at the upper echelon of his career. That was his peak. Um, Corliss Williamson was a bench player. Chucky Atkins, of course, we know made
Yep.
the trip over. But this was the pre Chauncey Billups days.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Smith was a guy who eventually moved on to Minnesota to drop off into oblivion.
Yep.
And half of this knowledge comes from playing 2K. I will not lie to you here. Jerome Williams, not a clue who he is. Michael Curry, I've heard the name. Don't even think he's in 2K. Dana Barros was a tiny little guy, I believe. Let me look that up because I'm genuinely curious what his height was because I think I had him in 2K one year, and he was 5'11".
Okay.
Okay. Which if you ever play 2K, 5'11" guys, they make those guys look like they're 5'6". All right. Billy Owens, who was decent in his time with the Golden State Warriors, but at this point in his career, that's not what he is.
Yep.
But Teen Cleaves, no idea. And then Mickey Moore. I don't know if you remember, Sean. Mickey Moore played in 2007, I want to say, or 2008.
Yep.
The Nets were so strapped for cash that he was the only center they could afford
Yep.
when Nenad Kristich got hurt. And he actually, at that point in his career, and in his mid-30s, led the NBA in field goal percentage.
Yeah.
But that was the only decent year of his career.
Yep.
The only reason why he was in the league that year
Yep.
was because the Nets were so cheap.
Yeah. Anyway, the coach was George Irvine. Their
I have
offense
never heard of
offense was 25th, defense was 8th, and the net rating was 19th at a minus.
Okay, so what we see here is where Ben Wallace goes, defense follows. But at the same time, what they gave up, if you're Orlando, is not a lot. You'll take being a top 10 team in defensive rate.
But this was only 0-1, right? Like, okay, and then we can go back and look, right? Like, what did Ben Wallace do in 0-1? Well, he didn't actually contribute to the team. He played 4 games. Or Grant Hill, sorry. On the Magic.
Oh, yeah.
He played 4 games.
Yes, but Ben Wallace
did some contributions.
Some is a nice way of putting it.
He played 80 games. He had a .121 in his win share.
And he averaged a career high 13.2 rebounds per game. But you couple that with a guy who's still... And look, Ben Wallace was never a great scorer.
No.
That's just...
Not at all.
His career high for points was 9.7 points per game.
Yep.
At this point in his career, in 2000 to 2001, he is averaging 6.4 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to Chucky Atkins and say, well, hey, excuse me, what did you do for us? Chucky gave you 12 points, but he didn't really give you much else. He gave you 4 assists, which are comparable numbers. This is in today's game, Chucky Atkins would be a decent, but
I don't think
still
Chucky
would
Atkins
not,
is in the NBA in today's game.
no, but his numbers would be in the NBA today. If a
Okay.
guy gave you 12 and 5 as a sixth man, he wouldn't win sixth man of the year,
No.
but you would take that on the top 15 teams in the league.
Right. So, anyway, let's take a look at how the playoffs work. So,
Yeah.
obviously, only one of these teams are in the playoffs. The Magic
Yeah.
at 7 in the East.
And we will have to say, this was a year, as Sean kind of alluded to mistakenly. Grant Hill played 4 games this year. And you'll see what this means because they added Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady, and this was one of their better seasons
Yeah.
without Grant Hill playing. And this was really, I guess, the birth of Tracy McGrady's career as a superstar. Because
Yeah, he really made a name for himself in these few years.
Right. And it kind of shifted. Was Grant Hill going to be the number 1 guy or Tracy McGrady? And from there on out, it was Tracy McGrady's team.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what makes us think, what would have happened if the trade didn't happen at all?
Yeah. So yeah, the Magic were the 7 seed. They lost in the opening round, 3-1 in a best of 5. Pistons missed the playoffs 8 games out of 8th, which were the 11 games outside of Orlando. So
Right, which was and don't ask me why. I just thought it was a nice thing to do to include the Western Conference, despite the fact that I realized halfway through that both these teams are in the East.
yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
Orlando is basically like in Florida's like the California of the East. So like we're splitting hairs really.
All right.
Elongated state on the coast.
Yeah. Okay. So if we take a look at the roster for 0102, we have Grant Hill again.
And we also see in this NBA landscape of the early 2000s, we're very much not in the era of super teams, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, your teams don't really change here.
You're right. Your teams don't really change. At this point in time in the NBA, the best way to get big names or guys past their prime who are looking for competitiveness before their knees gave out, basically.
Yep. And your rankings don't really change either. Right? So,
no. If you're Orlando, the fact that you get Grant Hill back and he plays,
I think it's like 14 games.
Didn't really get him back in that sense. Yeah, he plays 14 games, but he averages 17 points. Did he play in the playoffs that year? No. In fact, it's worth noting here and now as we look this up, Grant Hill did not play a single playoff game for the Magic at all.
Ever.
Not until 2006, 2007, when he was 34 years old.
Yeah.
But in the era of what we're looking at, which is the 4-year window of Wallace, Hill, and Atkins being on these respective teams,
Grant
Hill never played a meaningful game.
Let's see the playoffs, right? So here we actually have a pretty big reversal, right? Where the Magic, they improved, they got to 5th, but the Pistons are 2nd. The Pistons have a 50-32 record and they make the 2nd round, okay? The Magic have a 44-38 record and they lose the 1st round again.
Yeah. So I mean, as you said, roster turnover doesn't really happen at this point
Yeah.
in NBA history, but you know, you think year two, even if you don't have Grant Hill, you have McGrady second year in the system, should be able to make some kind of jump.
I
But
mean,
when I
they,
say some kind of jump, I don't mean one game.
yeah, I don't mean being fifth by and beating your old record by like one game. Yes.
And like, let me take a look here, and if you wouldn't mind going through the Pistons, because I want to see what exactly this Hornets team that won looked like.
Though, I mean, I don't know, but like my point is that like okay, the Pistons were 9 games outside of the 8th seed of the playoffs in 2001, right?
Hmm.
They were like 32 and something. I'm pretty sure they just reversed their record. I mean, I'm not looking for that type of improvement for the Magic, but like, damn, you're the ones that's supposed to hit 50 wins, especially because you had Grant Hill for 10 more games. This should have been like at least 5, 6 more wins, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely agree. But
And it's just like what it's not even you didn't just miss the expectations, you literally just let down the expectation.
yeah,
So all right, you have
but who didn't let down the expectation were those Pistons,
yeah.
who somehow jumped from 11 games back of the Magic all the way to second place in the East.
Yep.
So at that point, you look at what Orlando has and you say, there's no excuses. The Pistons have, if we can go back a slide and take a look at that roster, like
What is
we
this
still have
team?
no, we still have no Chauncey Billups. We still have Corliss Williamson as your number three.
Yeah.
This team has no right winning 50 games.
What is this team? The previous record of theirs was 32 and 50. How did they switch their record around is my question.
Right, an 18 game swing.
Yeah.
But the Magic, who have, yes, another year of injured Grant Hill,
But he played
they
10
still
more
have the,
games
right, but they still have a bigger superstar in Tracy McGrady
than any of
at this
these players.
time than any player, right? Because Ben Wallace, like we said, his career high in points is 9.7.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, that doesn't mean shit. The amount of rebounds he gets. Tracy McGrady putting up 20 some points per game or close to 20 points per game will always outdo the rebounds.
Oh,
So it's a very interesting
all right.
model.
Well, let's take a look at our final playoff outlook, right? So, we are actually have some differences in players this year, right? Aside of Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, you
Yeah.
have
So you have Drew Gooden in his rookie year,
yep.
and Drew Gooden did have a very long, successful NBA career. He was never an All Star caliber player, but he was a big man
But
who
you don't need to
could
be
get
an
you
all-star
in the league.
caliber player to be in the NBA. You need to just find your niche.
Right. You had, but this is where I say, and I know you remember Jacques Vaughn, who was Jason Kidd's backup back in the day.
Yep.
He was god awful with the Nets, but hey, he's apparently a coaching whiz now. But again, getting back to what getting big names meant at the time. Any team in the 90s would have killed to have Horace Grant, but at this point in his career, Horace Grant is nowhere near what he was.
Oh no.
Any team in the 90s would love to have the Sonics version of Sean Kemp, but at this point, Sean Kemp had ballooned up to be a relatively, let's just call it, thick person. Like he was very out of shape
Yep.
and he was basically getting cut from teams, but his name kept him in the league.
Yep.
This was Sean Kemp's last year in the NBA, if I'm correct.
Yeah, but okay, we finally entered the era of Chauncey Billups, though, on the Piston side, where you have Chucky Atkins down to sixth man.
Yeah. I, but that's like, look, this is what I said earlier. Chucky Atkins' model statistically plays out as a sixth man.
Yeah, but
If
he
you're only going,
wasn't.
if you're a point guard and you're only going to get 5 assists, granted, when I play basketball, I'm looking to dish the ball more than anybody in today's NBA playing the point guard position is.
Yep.
But 5 assists is low. You
Yeah.
should be somewhere around at the very least 7.
Hmm.
That's just at that point where the where superstars didn't run the show, and you could get away in today's NBA with being a point guard who has 3 assists. At this point in time, the point guard position was not about scoring a ton
No.
of buckets. It was about getting plays to other people.
I mean, I
Now,
think that like the names of the positions mattered more in previous years. Like, like you had point guard, but you had the shooting guard. You had the center. Like all these like guys, like the center doesn't really matter. Just jump for a ball and get it, right? Nowadays.
yeah, if that.
And you literally had the point guard who literally just stood point and the ball was going in and out of his hand. Not towards
Right.
the net.
So the interesting thing here is we now look at a Pistons team that has acquired some talent.
Yeah.
Chauncey Billups, we realized more and more as we did our research beforehand, excuse me, was a top draft pick who kind of stagnated early in his career
Yeah.
and eventually made his way to Denver. And he was from Colorado and he went to college in Colorado, but did not stick with the Nuggets. And eventually, after a sign and trade that put him in Denver, ended up uh, in Detroit as a free agent.
Yep.
Um, and then Richard Hamilton, who was drafted a top 10 pick in 1999 by the Washington Wizards, so was probably with Ben Wallace at the very end. Actually, no.
No, Ben Wallace left in '97, right?
Uh, Ben Wallace left in 1998-99. So this was the following offseason. Richard Hamilton is drafted to the Wizards.
Yep.
Hamilton spends 3 years with the Wizards before being traded to Detroit for a package including Jerry Stackhouse. So Jerry Stackhouse, the team's leading scorer, is shipped out for a guy who is in his 4th season, and at that point in time, Richard Hamilton, let's see here, was averaging or coming off a season where he did average 20 points. He's a shooting guard in this day and age, shooting guard, small forward. His second and third years in the NBA, he averaged 18 and 20.
Hmm.
That's a big haul. You're willing to give up Jerry Stackhouse, who is now at this point plateaued
Yeah.
in terms of what he will give you. You know what he'll give you, but he's not going to get better.
No.
Whereas Richard Hamilton is
Can't
going
get better.
into his age 24 season with a ton of time to get better.
Yep.
But you don't know what you're getting in Chauncey Billups. Clifford Robinson at this point in his career is still a starter, but his best days were in Portland.
Yeah, that's about
A
it.
couple years prior when they lost the conference finals to the Lakers. But then the rest of this roster stays relatively the same. And you'll notice that Tayshaun Prince, who eventually becomes the third man or the fourth man, I guess, because of it depends on where you really want to put Ben Wallace in the equation. If we're talking scoring, Tayshaun Prince takes the third man
Yeah.
and Wallace takes the fourth. But in terms of he was 11th on the depth chart.
Yeah.
Like, you go through all the minutes played, he barely plays above guys that I think were mostly European that you'd never heard of.
Yep.
And you never will. So Tayshaun Prince, and what happens here is we see a turn in development. And I do notice here that I may have the record wrong for
The records are from 2 seasons ago, by the way.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forgive me, I threw these graphics together mostly on a lunch break while eating soup.
We did the same. I had soup this afternoon too, so.
It's diet time of the year. You gotta look good for pool season.
Yeah, anyway, so now that we've taken the deep dive into this roster, here is how it turned out. And still, Western Conference, you're just there for kicks, I guess.
Yes.
Pistons
We do
stay.
have accurate records. We do have accurate records on this depiction, though.
Pistons stay at number 1. And Magic
stay exactly the same in record too.
Yeah, and Magic, they stay close to the same in record, but they go down to 8.
Right, and we're talking about a Grant Hill that at this point
Had
has
played.
played 20. In theory, here we're ramping something up here. We went from 4 to 14 to 29. Hopefully next year he gets to half a season. Unfortunately, foreshadowing a little bit, he didn't play at all next season.
No.
So at this point, we have a Grant Hill that stepped onto the Orlando Magic roster going into his age 28 season, having played a collective, 18 plus 29. You want to do the quick math for me, Sean?
18 plus 29, so you're at 37, 47.
47 games in 3 seasons. And then in 2003-04, he doesn't play a single game. He's going into his age 32 season. You got this guy thinking, we're going into his prime years. We're going to get the best out of him. And so be it if we backload the contract and we have to pay more when he's out of his prime. You don't even get to see his prime.
Nope. His prime was beforehand.
And yet, you still have Doc Rivers, you still have Tracy McGrady.
Yeah.
You have names, I guess, but like not really.
No.
Because your names are basically like an off-wheel 4-wheel drive or off-terrain 4-wheel drive car with only 3 tires.
Yep.
Like it you can market it as you can take this thing on the beach, you can take this thing on the mountains. You're still going to have a lot of trouble taking it anywhere with only 3 wheels.
Yep.
So that's what the Magic are at this point. And they're desperately grasping for straws and desperately grasping for competitiveness because this is how it works in sports. You balance the books, you take a big swing and say, now's the time to build up and be competitive, and we're going for it. You kind of have to go for it because you have Tracy McGrady on the books, and Tracy McGrady is not going to be like, well, I came here to, just do the same thing that Toronto was doing, which was not really winning.
Yeah.
But
so the other thing is this Doc Rivers led team lost to the Pistons in the first round, albeit it was 4-3, so it's kind of close. But
right.
The Pistons, who now have Rick Carlisle instead of George Irvin, whatever.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah, they make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals where they lose to the Nets 4-0.
Yes, as Sean and I would put it, the glory days.
Yeah.
Back when, I think I remember they led the game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals with an alley-oop from half court.
Yeah.
And that was the highlight of being a New Jersey Nets fan. You were like, can't go wrong from here. And
it can.
It absolutely did. So, but Rick Carlisle as many basketball heads will know, has been a coach that, looking at it now, has been around a very long time. George Irvin was not. Doc Rivers is. So, yes, we're talking about, at this point in time, guys who are young in their head coaching careers, because we're not talking about the
Yeah.
Doc Rivers who was in Boston and
Yeah, he made
LA
a
and
name for
Philly.
himself in Boston and Philly. Yeah.
Right. And we're also not talking about the Rick Carlisle who, was a mainstay with Dallas for many years with Dirk and won a title there.
Yep.
But we are talking about coaches who had a lot of potential,
Yeah.
coaches who did very well with star players. And look, Rick Carlisle, when he was looking further down the line, when he had basically just Dirk, still got them to the finals.
Yeah.
Doc Rivers, when he had Paul Pierce, kind of had the same result as what the Magic were.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until there was a lot of star power there.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about coaches and analyzing it and realizing some coaches need a lot of help and some coaches don't.
So let's go back and actually say, who do we think made out on this deal, and what would have happened in the reverse?
Yes, and I think we need to play out the hypothetical here of Grant Hill's health too.
Yeah, but can we attribute the failure of Grant Hill's health in any part to the Magic and its support staff?
Yes, I think you potentially can.
Okay.
Because, yeah, Grant Hill only plays 4 games in that 2001 season. But we don't know we also know that when it comes to sport, there are great organizations like the Phoenix Suns who have incredible training staffs that keep guys like Steve Nash who have chronic back disease, back injuries that should have made him retire from the game in his early 30s, going for another 10 years.
Yeah.
There are also organizations where, like, I want to say the New York Mets, where a guy walks down the stairs, gets hurt, and he's out for months.
Yep.
And the reality of the situation is we don't know where Detroit and Orlando fall with their training staff at this point in time. It's safe to assume that at least one of the two is in the middle. And we can only guess hypothetically that one of the two is either really good or really bad.
Yeah.
Because we have to play out the law of averages here, and that just means they're both in the middle, or one's really good and
the other's really bad.
Or just because we are looking at 29 teams in the grand scheme of things and not just the two, if one is really good, the rest of the sample size would suggest that the other is mid-tier.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but
looking at it that way and looking at what Orlando is,
if Orlando's support staff was better at the time, do we think they go any farther? Because my answer would be no.
I think there's an argument to be made.
Okay, but my argument is, even in the season he played 30 games, your win-loss doesn't get affected by it. In fact, it goes down. If he's a star player, he played 30 games, right? I would expect you to get to 46 wins, 47 wins, instead of be that 42.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I think there's two sides to this. When you have Tracy McGrady and Grant Hill coming together and meshing for the first time, I think that there's wiggle room there.
But also, my point is that if they hadn't meshed for 3 years, because he practiced before he got hurt in his 4th game. He practiced.
Yes, but it's completely different when you're playing against the scout team second stringers and you're playing against
but
Shaq.
The point is that you still had some time to develop your play style with the two of them. He only played 4 games, sure, but the next he played 14. That's an eighth of the season. That's a lot.
Okay, so but let's look at what McGrady's numbers were. And in 2000 to 2001, he averaged 27 points per game.
Right.
And then that era of NBA,
Yeah.
that is a ton.
Yeah.
And then if we look at what Grant Hill was set to average, because I'm going to look at his in between his 29 and 14 games and kind of project out on the 4 game because he was younger. It's only right to project out.
I mean, you can even take.
Let's call it 16 points per game for Grant Hill.
I was going to say, you can even say it's like 18.
Yeah,
probably fair.
And Orlando thought they were getting what Detroit got in their last year, which was 26.
Mm-hmm.
So if you project that out, yes, McGrady and Hill combined are not getting 27 points a game combined for each of them.
But 27 and 18 is normal.
Right. Between the two of them, you're probably getting 45 to 50 points per game.
Yeah.
And we're talking in a low-scoring NBA where defense is supreme.
Yeah. But,
so,
I mean, you still had him for 30 games. And that should have done something.
I get what you're saying. But I will give the benefit of the doubt in that first year.
The first year is out. I don't care. Like, 4 games is nothing, right?
Right.
But he was on the court for 1/8 of the season, and that's not a lot of the season. Okay, I get it. But then he almost made it halfway. 30 games almost, right?
29.
29. You should have felt the impact of him on the court in some of those 30 games. And it doesn't seem like it.
Yes, but no, because I will be the first one to tell you, not from experience, but you know as well as I do watching sports, that if a guy is out for such an extended period of time for an injury, the rust factor, even if there is an off-season program, even if they play in preseason, there is a rust factor for at least 10
factor
games.
Does not. I don't think a rust factor should last 30 games.
Right, but I'm saying like 10 games.
Yeah, sure. But you still have 20 games to figure it out. To at least show yourself once or twice. Be the reason that your team has won a game.
Right, but I mean, he did still average 15, 5 and 5 basically, which in that
that's fine.
First of all,
but he's not a star. It's not 10 million. It's not 12, 13 million dollars at the time.
Now at that point in his career, no, it's not. But let's also play the mental game here. You've hurt yourself to the tune of 18 games over the past 2 seasons. Kind of hard to trust your body at this point. And it's kind of what we end up seeing in Derrick Rose after his big injury. You come back, but is it really the same? Can you actually trust? Like, look, I've had 2 knee dislocations in my left knee, and I'm a righty, and yeah, I'm an adult who goes and my most rigorous task is playing kickball right now. But if you don't think that even with wearing cleats and doing physical therapy over the past few months to try to refortify my kneecap and stuff like that, if you don't think that every time I play pickup basketball or like even just play kickball, I don't think, if I plant my foot the wrong way, we're looking at torn ACL or something. Like, you constantly, when you have big injuries, way bigger than anything I've ever had or way bigger than anything that you've had, at some point you play cautiously because...
But if you're playing cautiously, I don't think 15... Like, if we're going off the expectation of McGrady and Grant Hill making 45 points, playing cautiously and still getting 15 points per game,
you'll take that.
Is doing something. It's not you'll take it. It's like, it's not that you're a superstar, but you're definitely probably like third third in the team on scoring.
Right, but let's look at what Grant Hill's career was. He ended up playing till he was 40.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is realizing at some point that for his personal career, it probably was best to not risk losing it all right now. And so when you say, "Hey, I can accept a sixth man role. I can accept being your fourth or fifth scoring option, or even your third scoring option, where it's not on me to do the heavy lifting, and I can stay within what my limitations that I know are," then you get an extra 10 years in your career.
Yep.
Carmelo Anthony, once he was out of the league because he wanted to be a starter when he was with Oklahoma City, and he didn't want to accept that he was in his mid 30s or early 30s, whatever it was, and that he was a one-dimensional player and the game was passing him by. Once you come around to accepting your limitations, you open up the door for, potential growth and a potential to elongate your career. And I think at one point when you look and say, I've played 47 games over the past 4 years, when I played 4 years of college without really missing a game, and I played, 80 plus games, like 5 of my first 6 years,
Yeah.
there's no reason to think that you're going to slow down until it happens. And then you kind of have to say, well, the numbers say that I've slowed down heavily. So as I get older, am I actually going to get better? So I think, to me, and this is a long way of getting back to it, I think that Grant Hill probably, we're not saying he forced his way out of Detroit, but we're also saying at this point in time, a 7-year contract and the money and how the league was spending, if we're playing out a hypothetical where there's a fixed cap and everybody plays by the same budget and can spend the same amount of money, then Detroit had no reason to let him go. And, 2 years later, yeah, maybe they still have Jerry Stackhouse, but if they make the same moves because they realize they can't win with only Grant Hill and Jerry Stackhouse, and they make the same moves, you obviously could have won a championship without Ben Wallace. He got you rebounds. He was good defensively, but what does 2 blocks a game really do for you?
But for that amount of money, 2 blocks a game is fine.
Right. But
you could have afforded a superstar with that amount of money.
Right. But say that Stackhouse leaves, you don't get any draft capital from that trade.
Uh-huh.
But what you do get is you still, because Richard Hamilton went to Washington, Washington's not a factor in this. Washington still has the same draft pick and still takes Richard Hamilton. They still flip it for Jerry Stackhouse. So that trade remains the same. Tayshaun Prince, I think, was a late first or second round draft pick. So we're going to operate under the assumption that either way, you could have gotten him. Chauncey Billups was still bouncing around the league, and at this point was after his second or third team. So we're going to operate under the assumption that he wasn't big money to begin with. So if everything plays out, I think, yeah, you would trade off having Ben Wallace's stats for Grant Hill's stats. And I arguably think, yeah, you never see Darko Milicic in a Pistons jersey, and you don't have to endure that big bust potential. But the Pistons won 1 ring at their height. They got to the finals twice. They won 1 ring.
Mm-hmm.
You can argue that if they give that same contract to Grant Hill and he stays in Detroit, because then he plays all the way till 2007, You can argue that they make the finals more times. You make the argument that they win at least 2 rings. This is, and we're talking about competitive window before Rasheed Wallace is even there.
Okay.
We're not even factoring that in because Rasheed Wallace was still an all-star when he got there. But yeah, even then, you take Grant Hill over Rasheed Wallace, even with injury risks.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rasheed Wallace is on the decline or has plateaued, but Grant Hill is a superstar. And you'll take that. So, I think that Orlando, I think that they mix well having a Tracy McGrady and a Ben Wallace. I think that inside outside game would have been beautiful. It kind of would have been a mini Kobe Shaq. It wouldn't have gotten you rings, but it probably would have gotten you.
I think that Ben Wallace on the Magic with McGrady, in the grand scheme of things, with how much Grant Hill got hurt, it was probably a better team.
I think so too. But what I will also say is looking at what the Pistons got out of what they did in reality, how things went. You still needed Tayshaun Prince, you still needed Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, and you needed Richard Hamilton to get to a finals and win 1 ring. So to say that the Magic would have been what? Any better than a team that makes the second round?
I do
Is
think they
probably
are more consistent, though, and have a better shot out of the second round. If
yeah.
this,
Yes. And look, the East at this point in time is weaker than the West by a long shot.
Yeah.
The Kings, the Lakers, the Spurs are all dynasties
Yep.
in their own respect. Well, not the Kings, but they were really fucking good at that point in time. Whereas the best teams in the East were the Nets, who had massive holes,
Yep.
the Sixers, who had massive holes. And so Detroit really became the juggernaut just because nobody really stepped up at the time.
Yeah.
Because the best team in the 2000s decade in the East has to be, at first thought, based on roster construction outside of the Pistons, the '08 Celtics. With Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. That was the start of the super team era.
Yeah, true.
Every other team had holes that could be exploited in the East.
Yeah.
As I remember in the mid 2000s, the Golden State Warriors missing the playoffs entirely with like 48 or like 43 wins. And at that point in time, they would have been like the third or fourth best team in the East one year.
Yeah.
So the East was way worse. So yeah, Orlando would have been better. Maybe they sneak into a conference final, but they're not winning.
No, I'm not saying they win. Nobody's saying they win. Even the Pistons, I think the Pistons, if you switch and you keep everything the same, do they win? It's not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed, but the way that their roster is then constructed, it is.
I mean, I think it changes the dynamic of that roster. Just the Ben Wallace part leaving, it changes the dynamic of that roster a lot. So it really matters is like, do they find that non-defensive play style, and do they use it well?
And it's weird because when I think about teams, I think Orlando very much not so much as a franchise that values defense, but it was to say, because like, look, Tracy McGrady wasn't the defensive ace in his own mind. He was one of my favorite players growing up, but like that dude was all about scoring.
Yep.
Whereas Detroit, like, they kind of acquired a lot of guys who could do a little bit of everything.
Yep.
And Grant Hill was no exception to that. Yeah, he had lost ball turnovers every now and then. But like
he had
it's not
what,
like he was a
2,
slouch
3
on
lost balls
defense.
a game? 2, maybe 1.5.
I mean, you're the best point guard. I remember the best college
But
basketball point
like
guards
he
average
basically
in this-
had 2 lost balls and 1 bad pass per game, which is like nothing in the grand scheme of things, I think.
Yeah, but like, look, I remember that in college basketball, the best assist to turnover ratio that you would love to have for a point guard is 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
So, for what Grant Hill was doing as not a point guard, you have to think that the ratio is closer to 2-1.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about a guy who put up, at the very least, in his early years, we're talking, he was putting up, let's just call it 1997, for example, 21 points per game, 9 rebounds and 7 assists a game.
That's about 2-1.
2-1, maybe closer to 3-1.
No, it's closer to 2-1 if you say he's going to turn over 3 times.
With 7 assists per game.
He's going to turn over 3 times a game, right? So 7 threes are 2.3.
Well, I'm saying for a small forward.
Yeah, I mean, so
numbers are
it is closer to
what
2-1, so it's
you want.
fine. That's what I'm saying.
So I'm saying his numbers are closer to what you would want from a point guard because it is closer to 3-1. It's 2.5-1.
Fair enough.
So
Anyway, we had a nice long episode paying homage to our old episodes that went on for quite a while, I guess.
it'll never compare to the 2-hour first episode that we ever did, which was subsequently met with a family friend saying, "You got to shorten your episodes." And I said, "Thanks, Tim. You've done one so far."
Yeah, so
I had a lot of fun with this one. I don't know about you.
yeah, it was good. Anyway, yeah, that was a hope you like the new style of episode that we're gonna try out. Mix in every once in a while.
And we have an in-person episode version 3 coming soon. Is it 3 or 4? Whatever it is.
3, I think.
So get ready for that. We've got some. I don't know if we're going to do this in bar stools or we got to figure out where to actually do this.
Anyway,
I'm not going downtown and like renting out a podcast studio in some like upscale apartment building.
no. Anyway, yeah, so that was episode 100. Thanks everybody for tuning in and catch you next time.